It's getting ragged now for Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Next month, Labor's going to hold its national conference that sets Labor policy. And for the first time in decades, the Labor left have a majority of votes there. And that really worries Albanese, even though he's on the left too. He's asked the left not to embarrass him, not to vote against his nuclear subs deal with the US or tell him to recognise a Palestinian state now. In fact, he doesn't even want them to discuss these things. The former Labor Senator Doug Cameron, his tweeted, well, forget that. The ALP left have a proud history, says, of challenging bad policy at the national conference, would be gobsmacked if nuclear subs, regressive tax cuts and Palestine are not debated. And he said political discipline doesn't mean the left have to subjugate themselves. Joining me is Australia's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of The Australian. Greg, what is happening here?
Well, Andrew, you're right. It's very embarrassing for the Albanese government. So Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong are the two senior figures in the Labor left, and they are delivering the left bucket loads of policy. Industrial relations, climate change, identity politics, constitutional reform, every dream the left has ever had. But you can never overstate the absolute unreality of the left and their determination to alienate mainstream Australia. So the left wants to put resolutions condemning our conventionally armed nuclear-propelled submarines, which, if we're lucky, we'll have a fleet of 8 of by 2050, and telling the Albanese government to recognise a non-existent Palestinian state tomorrow. Now, I think if the left put those resolutions, and Albanese and his ministers, all of them, fiercely opposed it, and they were decisively defeated at conference. That's what happened in the good old days of the Hawke government. That would be a great thing. But Albanese's forces want to have a factional fix where the motions are just not put. Well, that would be better than having the motions passed. But, you know, there's just been a by-election, or there's just about to be a by-election in Perth for the seat where the Stirling naval base is, and AUKUS hasn't even been mentioned. It's as if the Albanese government is kind of embarrassed to argue the merits of the AUKUS subs to its own Labor constituency, and having committed to the AUKUS subs, it's not going to spend another dollar on defence for the next 100 years anyway. The left should be happy with this pacifist outcome.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because you've actually got big names from Labor's past, like former Prime Minister Paul Keating, former Foreign Minister Bob Carr, former Foreign Minister Gareth Evans. You know, they've been whacking this subs deal. If it did get to the floor of the national conference, if they did defy Albanese and debate it, could he lose a vote on this? And if he did, what would it matter?
I don't think he would lose a vote on it. If he lost it, it would be incredibly embarrassing and unbelievably embarrassing. Therefore, I'm sure it won't happen, because every minister in the government would be scared of losing their own job as a result. And even in the bad old days, not since Arthur Calwell was leader has National Conference outright defied the national leadership. And indeed, the national parliamentary leadership are delegates to the conference in their own right, and they have proxy delegates and so forth. So I don't think the government can possibly lose on AUKUS. They might lose on the Palestinian state, because that's not a thing that the government is centrally concerned with. It would be an insane motion that you have to recognise a non-existent Palestinian state, you know, by a certain date. It's inconceivable to me that they would lose a motion on AUKUS. And in a way, it would be better to have the fight and defeat the left. But, you know, the Albanese government, it has its strengths, but it pretends that it can, you know, it's a bit like The Voice. It thinks it's, you know, it's got a God-given right to win these things without a fight. Well, you know, you got to fight for things you believe in. And Bob Hawke and Kim Beazley and Bill Hayden, they went around all the branches of the Labor Party and they told them why they had to support the American alliance and the visit of nuclear-powered ships and all the rest of it. I haven't seen Albanese and Miles and the gang doing that much.
Yeah, maybe on one of Albanese's many foreign trips, he could do a foreign trip to all these Labor branches and start arguing his own policy here instead of overseas. And as for Palestine, I wonder which state these Labor lefties want to recognise. Is it the half that's run by Hamas militants, terrorists, or the other half that's run by a guy that refuses to hold an election in many, many years? Now, listen, Greg, talking about former problematic Labor prime ministers, Kevin Rudd is now our ambassador to Washington. He's jumped onto the hype of the Barbie movie that's breaking box office records here. He's now tweeted this meme: Ambassador Rudd, he's just Kevin. Cringe making or very useful profile raising?
Well, you know, Andrew, I wouldn't really beat up on Kevin for being Kevin. I mean, he is a mixed grill, and like all of us, he's a very individual guy. You know, a Russian who I was a little intimidated by once asked me what I thought of Vladimir Putin, and I said, well, he's very distinctive, isn't he? You know, and Kevin is certainly very distinctive, but. Look, as far as I can tell, he's doing a good job in Washington. He's certainly intimately connected with all the Washington insiders. He was a bit of an AUKUS skeptic himself, but now he's fully committed to selling AUKUS to the American governmental system and the Congress, and he is an absolute policy obsessive. He's certainly very knowledgeable on China. So I think it is a good thing overall that he's there doing that. Tweets on Barbie, well, you know, that's our Kevin. I mean, you and I mightn't do it, but there you go. There it is.
Greg, thank you for telling me to cut him some slack, because Kevin is Kevin. Let's see what he actually does in the job. Thank you so much for your time, Greg Sheridan.